In a quiet town nestled between foggy hills and a hidden forest, there lived a young girl named Shelby. At 19, she was spirited, bright-eyed, and unwaveringly loyal to her older sister Molly, who was 24, beautiful, kind, and full of life, with a laugh that could chase away the shadows of the darkest days. The two sisters shared an inseparable bond, as Molly had practically raised Shelby when their mother passed away 5 years ago, and their father died when she was just 4 years old. Shelby had always found peace and harmony in their small home. Life in the mountain was simple and predictable until one day Molly vanished without a trace that turned her world upside down. The morning air was damp and heavy, hanging like a weight on Shelby's shoulders as she pushed through the thick underbrush, calling her sister's name. Every footstep sank into the wet earth, leaving dark impressions that reminded her how alone she was out here. Her heart pounded harder with each unanswered call. It had been 3 days since Molly disappeared. 3 endless days of searching the same trails, questioning the same neighbors, and scouring the woods over and over, hoping for a sign that this nightmare might have an end. Molly, her voice wavered, cracking in the stillness that felt heavier than silence. Where are you? A call of desperation and anguish. A flash of white caught her eye through a stand of twisted trees. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as she took a tentative step forward. Then another. Molly, she utters slowly in a whispery voice. Branches scraped against her as she moved, but she barely noticed, her eyes locked on the shape slumped against a tangle of roots and moss. Shelby's mind raced, trying to tell herself that this wasn't real, that this couldn't be what it seemed. But with each step closer, the truth settled into her bones, icy and paralyzing. There was her sister, still and pale, her form crumpled beneath the canopy of the forest. Shelby fell to her knees beside Molly's body, her hands trembling as she reached out, brushing strands of tangled hair from her sister's face. She couldn't bring herself to look too closely, afraid of what more she might see. "Molly," she whispered, her voice broken, lost in the emptiness that had opened up inside her. The forest was silent, a cruel indifference stretching in every direction. A faint breeze stirred the leaves overhead, and Shelby thought, for one painful moment, that her sister would feel it too, would shiver and open her eyes the way she had 1,000 times when Shelby woke her gently. But Molly lay there, unmoving, cold to the touch. It was then that the tears came, fierce and unstoppable, as Shelby clutched her sister's hand and wept. Her beloved sister was gone. A few minutes later, her neighbors came and helped her as she hadn't had any strength to pull herself together. She keeps uttering that it's all just a dream and her sister is still alive out there, but every time she opens her eyes, the reality slaps her hard. The police ruled it an accident, a tragic slip on the wet stones causing Molly to fall from the cliff. But Shelby knew better. Molly had been a careful hiker, cautious and sure-footed. The death was too quickly swept aside and classified as an unfortunate accident. Yet, Shelby felt a chill that wouldn't leave her, a gnawing suspicion that demanded the truth. No one else seemed to want to look deeper. But Shelby couldn't ignore what her heart tells. Grief weighed heavily on Shelby, but beneath it burned something sharper and hotter, the need for justice. She couldn't simply let Molly's death fade into the quiet shadows of unsolved cases. Molly had cared for her, loved her, and guided her, and now it was her turn to fight for her sister. Searching for clues, Shelby had investigated the people she knew who knew Molly, but hadn't found any clues that made her frustrated, so began searching by combing through Molly's things, piecing together fragments of her sister's secretive love life. She found small clues: a note tucked in the pages of Molly's favorite book, a single earring, and a worn ticket stub from a movie they'd seen together. And then, she found a phone. It was Molly's old phone, hidden away in a drawer, and it held the last pieces of her story. That alone lifted her spirit, and hoping it would give her a hint to her investigation. The messages painted a picture of a passionate but tense relationship. Molly had fallen deeply for an unknown man, but her messages grew strained, her words more pleading than loving in the final days. Shelby's chest tightened as she read her sister's words, sensing her loneliness and fear. One name popped up repeatedly: Rocky. Shelby now had a lead. She spent days researching, seeking out anyone who might know of him, learning more about his whereabouts and asking questions at cafes and bars Molly frequented. Some people remembered a man matching Rocky's description, a handsome but intense figure with a certain coldness in his gaze. They told her where he liked to spend his nights, and Shelby followed each clue with dogged determination. Her search eventually led her to a dimly lit club on the edge of town. It was a place Molly would never have gone, yet Shelby felt certain Rocky was there. She took a deep breath and stepped inside, blending in with the crowd and keeping her eyes sharp. Her heart pounded as she scanned the faces, and then she saw him. Rocky was laughing with a group of friends, carefree and untroubled. Shelby approached him, feeling a strange mixture of fear and anger. She introduced herself as Molly's sister, and for a flicker of a second, guilt flashed across his face. That's when she knew that Rocky had something to do with her sister. She confronted him, demanding answers, and though he tried to brush her off, she held her ground, challenging him with every step. Shelby's first challenge was finding out more about Rocky. He was well-liked and considered charming by most, but Shelby began hearing murmurs about his darker side. With patience, she managed to speak with people who knew him, including some of his old friends who hinted at his jealousy, but none dared to accuse him openly. His father, Mayor Conley, had the town wrapped around his finger, and fear kept everyone's mouth shut. One night, Shelby found an old diary of Molly's hidden in her room. Flipping through the pages, she read about Molly's growing discomfort around Rocky. She had written about how he would lose his temper over small things, how his jealousy had started to control her life. Shelby felt her heart break as she pieced together her sister's struggle. But it wasn't enough to prove anything. Facing Rocky's father, knowing she would need solid proof, Shelby decided to confront Rocky's father. She hoped that if she presented him with Molly's diary and pleaded her case, he might understand her need for closure. But Mayor Conley brushed her off, insisting that Rocky was innocent and warning her to stop spreading rumors. His voice was calm, but there was a hard edge in his eyes that chilled her. Shelby left his office feeling defeated but determined. She realized then that she would need to go behind his back if she wanted justice. Seeking allies. Finding allies in a town so loyal to the Conleys was nearly impossible. But slowly, Shelby found people willing to speak up, including Mr. Todd, the old man who came up front, sharing the deepest secret Mayor Conley had kept. Peter Todd is a former driver of Mayor Conley. He shared the biggest secret he kept for years and didn't want the same scene would repeat itself. He promises to testify against Mayor Conley when Shelby needs him. With that, she found the courage and hoped would find another person who was willing to help her. One night at the local diner, she spoke to a waitress named Kara, who shared that she'd seen Rocky and Molly arguing by the river the night she died. Kara was scared to come forward, but told Shelby she'd think about it. Encouraged, Shelby found herself emboldened to keep digging, even though she felt like everyone was watching her. But word got back to Rocky. One evening, Shelby was cornered by him at the general store. He whispered darkly, warning her that if she continued playing detective, she'd end up in trouble. She knew he was trying to scare her, but instead, it fueled her anger. Her sister deserved justice, and no threat would stop her. Gathering evidence, Shelby began studying everything she could about Molly's death, revisiting the site where her sister had been found. After days of searching, she discovered something shocking. Molly's pendant, a small locket she wore constantly, was tangled in a nearby bush. It didn't make sense for it to have been left there if Molly had simply fallen. She knew she had to get it examined to see if it had any clues, maybe DNA or some indication of a struggle. Taking the pendant to a trusted local investigator, Shelby managed to get the evidence processed quietly. The findings confirmed that Molly's locket had traces of blood that didn't belong to her. It was proof she'd been attacked. Upon this thorough investigation of the Conleys family, she found out the involvement of Mayor Conley in her father's death 15 years ago. The supposed car accident was intentional because of jealousy and selfish love. Mayor Conley is a former lover of her mother, but she chooses her father. After her father's death, her mother decided to leave the town and live in the mountains for their safety and to forget the past. Her mother had a hint about his father's accident, but she doesn't have proof, and the Conleys are influential. Her mother decides to bury the past, but she can't. She promises to bring justice to their family. The confrontation. With the new evidence, Shelby felt more empowered. She went to the police, demanding they reopen the investigation, both for her sister's and father's death. This time, with the hard evidence, the case gained traction from the people. But Rocky's father intervened, trying to bury it under red tape and legal threats. Yet, Shelby refused to back down. She made her story public, sharing Molly's diary, phone messages, and the locket with local reporters who took an interest in the story. It wasn't long before public pressure mounted. People began to question Rocky's actions and Mayor Conley's integrity. He could no longer silence everyone. Justice at last. The police finally brought Rocky in for questioning. Cornered and with nowhere left to hide, Rocky admitted to being with Molly in the forest that night. He'd been jealous, accusing her of spending too much time with her friends. In a fit of anger, he'd shoved her, not realizing how close she was to the edge. When she fell, he panicked and left her there, hoping it would look like an accident. And with Mr. Todd's testimony, Mayor Conley was convicted of murder and homicide, falsifying documents and concealing evidence of a crime. Rocky and his father were arrested. Mayor Conley's reputation was shattered. He was forced to resign, feeling disgraced, his power over the town broken. Shelby felt a bittersweet relief. She'd fought tooth and nail for justice, but nothing would bring Molly and her father back. On the day of Rocky's sentencing, Shelby visited the forest, where she found Molly's body. She knelt by the spot where her sister had fallen and placed Molly's favorite wildflowers there. The mountains felt different now, no longer peaceful, but somehow still watching over her, holding the memory of Molly. Months later, after Rocky was sentenced, Shelby stood in front of Molly and her parents' grave, tears mixing with a bittersweet sense of closure. She had brought justice for her sister, honoring Molly's memory with every painful step she'd taken. The shadows that had haunted their town now lifted, leaving Shelby with a newfound strength and a memory of Molly's laughter, a sound that would forever echo in her heart. Shelby knew she would carry her sister's memory forever. And though she had paid a heavy price, she had honored Molly and her father's life by seeking the truth. Mom, Dad, and Molly, I am now finally giving you justice. You can now rest in peace. I may be alone physically, but I know you guys are watching over me. Please help me to heal from the pain. Suddenly, she felt cold winds enveloping her body, which made her shiver and feel goosebumps all over. She can now finally smile. Her fight becomes the talk of the town. She also becomes an instrument to those people who lose hope in justice, and to those people who are afraid to fight. Her braveness encourages everyone not to be afraid, but to be courageous to face the challenges. Justice is served to those people who long for it with courage and determination. It's a hellish battle, but worth fighting for.